obviously, you know what this stuff was all about, right? It's not a surprise that we showed up tonight.
Almost overnight, she went from a possible witness to a person of interest in the case of a missing mom of 5 from New Canaan.
We see state police, New Canaan police, searching downtown Hartford.
So what's that about? Why is the scene moved to Hartford?
You need to tell us what you know about Jennifer's murder and Forrest Dulles.
The girlfriend in the middle of a bitter and brutal divorce battle.
Stuff you were throwing out, we have. And it's all Jennifer. It belongs to Jennifer. Do you understand?
Turned high-profile murder investigation.
Guys, what happened to Jennifer, Michelle? You're gonna do the right thing, Michelle?
We're taking you inside the trial of Michelle Troconis.
And thanks for joining us once again for Inside the Trial of Michelle Troconis. I'm Shannon Miller. It is the defense's turn to question the lead detective on the case of missing New Canaan mom Jennifer Dulles. This after the jury watched video for 2 days of investigators questioning Michelle Troconis a second time after her first arrest. We'll break down some of the key moments in the 3-hour-long interview. Michelle Troconis kept her composure in the courtroom on Friday as her second interview played. You'll remember she was tearful the day before when her initial interview was shown to the jury. And for the first time since the first day of the trial, we are hearing once again from Michelle's family as they showed their support for her outside the courthouse. Loved ones of Jennifer Dulles were also in the courtroom on Friday. We will hear from both sides coming up. All right, first, let's get you to NBC Connecticut's Kevin Geist, who joins us now live once again from Stamford. Kevin, let's start with that second interview Troconis gave to investigators. This one happening on June 6, 2019. This was about a week after her first arrest. Troconis once again agrees to speak with investigators as they continue their search for Jennifer Dulles.
Right, Shannon. This second interview is about 3 hours long. It takes place at attorney Andrew Bowman's office in Westport. Almost immediately, investigators start pressing Troconis on her account of May 24th, 2019, the day Jennifer Dulles disappeared.
I have a daughter and I'm going to be in jail.
It was a really emotional interview, Troconis breaking down in tears multiple times as investigators press her on discrepancies and that handwritten photocopied timeline found at 4 Jefferson Crossing. Detectives pushing to find out where Fotis was the morning of May 24th. Late in the day, Michelle Troconis' attorney got his chance to cross-examine the witness, Detective John Kimball, after 2 straight days of those interview videos. John Schoenhorn asking Kimball about the defendant's ability to speak English.
There were times when she answered in Spanish words. She would say, sí, bueno, pero, right?
Yes.
Do you know what any of those words mean?
Bueno is well. At least that's what it was translated to me. Sí, I believe, is yes.
How about pero?
Pero? I don't know pero.
Schoenhorn is expected to continue his cross-examination first thing this morning. There's also a third interview that Troconis did with investigators, but it's unclear when prosecutors will bring that interview in. Shannon.
All right, Kevin, let's go through some of those alleged discrepancies. Investigators really want to know where Fotis Dulles was the morning of May 24th, the day Jennifer disappeared. They asked Michelle about Fotis and his attorney friend, Kit Mawhinney.
Was Kent at the house that morning?
Yes. I did see.
And what was he doing at the house?
He had a meeting with Fotis.
Okay, so you just told us that you know if Fotis was at the house the morning of May 24th. But now you're telling us that Kent was at the house having a meeting with Fotis the morning of May 24th. Yes. So you need to decide which it is.
Bueno, he said he was in a meeting.
He who?
Kent, that he was having a meeting. No, sorry. Fotis told me that he has a meeting with Kent. I saw Kent because I went up to pick up my computer. So Kent was at the end of the office where there's a glass table, and I saw Kent. I'm not crazy.
When did Fotis tell you that he was having a meeting with Kent? As if you didn't see him that morning.
I think he told me the day before.
Okay. The morning when you saw Kent in Fotis' office, Friday morning,
yes.
You remember seeing Fotis in the office with him?
No.
Okay.
I did see Kent.
So you hear there, Troconis said Fotis told her the day before about a meeting with Kent Mawhinney, who was also charged as a co-conspirator in the case. Michelle says that she saw Kent, but not Fotis. In her first interview, Michelle told detectives she did see Fotis in the office.
Detective, the defendant just indicated to you that she did not see Fotis in the office. Is that correct?
Correct.
What had she told you on June 2nd about seeing Fotis in the office?
She said that she went to the office and she saw a meeting between Kent Mawhinney and Fotis Dulos.
So Kevin, talk now more about these alleged discrepancies. There's also the change from the handwritten timeline in her claim in interview 1 that she and Fotis showered together the morning of Jennifer's murder. Michelle later told investigators she didn't see Fotis that morning. In the third video, which we have yet to see, it's also got another alleged discrepancy.
Right, and as we work through this case, prosecutors are trying to prove to the jury that she couldn't stick to the timeline, that she was confused, and that without the timeline in front of her and without rehearsing it, she wasn't able to sort of get through the exact events of May 24th. But the defense's argument is that she simply was confused, and investigators were using coercive tactics, basically saying that they were pushing her into some of these discrepancies. It wasn't because she couldn't remember one way or the other.
Now, Kevin, another statement police thought Michelle was inconsistent about the weather overnight between May 23rd and 24th. Here's part of that interview.
Yes. He was there all night. Did he leave?
Well, I left the room at 12:59 because there was thunderstorm. My daughter called me. You guys have my phone, and you can see that I talked to my daughter.
Well, we can see that you may have talked to your daughter, but we can also see that there were no thunderstorms.
I don't know if thunderstorm. It was
You said
raining.
thunders.
I know, but
There was almost zero precipitation that evening.
So in her first interview, Michelle said that she went into her daughter's room and slept with her because those thunderstorms were scaring her daughter. But you just heard Detective Kimball say there was almost zero precipitation that night. Here's what he said Friday when the prosecution asked him about that.
Detective Kimball, you indicated to the defendant that there was zero precipitation that evening. Where did you get that information?
Got that from two sources. I got that from weatherunderground.com and timeanddate.com, two websites on historical weather.
And what area was that historical, well, beginning with Weather Underground, what area of Connecticut were you researching?
I was researching Farmington.
And what area did it display?
It displayed weather from Brainerd Airport in Hartford, which is approximately 24 miles to the northeast.
Okay, and with respect to time and date?
Oh, I'm sorry, 2019, May 24, at approximately between midnight and 1 o'clock in the morning.
Okay. And so did you, well, let me ask you this. Were you trying to be deceptive with her, or was this the best information that you had at the time?
I was not trying to be deceptive. That was the information I had at the time.
So during cross-examination, attorney John Schoenhorn then introduced this video to emphasize his point. He says Michelle was not lying and that there were thunderstorms that night. This is surveillance video from the Avon storage locker units on Old Farms Road around 12:46 a.m. on May 24th.
Can you tell us what you observed?
It appears to be rain falling.
Severely heavy rain?
Yeah, yes.
If we could just move it forward 3 or 4 minutes so we don't have to watch this exciting video. So at 12:54, it's still raining quite hard, is that right?
Rain, I don't see any lightning, but yes, I do see rain.
So, Kevin, just as the prosecution tried to poke holes in Michelle's account, the defense is trying to poke holes in what they thought at time were discrepancies as well. What else do you think we can expect from attorney John Schoenhorn today?
Right, I would expect him to continue pressing lead investigator at the time, John Kimball, again, trying to push toward showing the jury that investigators were using some of these coercive tactics. They were pushing her in the interviews with what they're calling ruses, sort of presenting false information to sort of lead her into saying certain things. So I would expect him to continue to just press John Kimball on exactly why he was saying the things he was, what he was saying at the time, and sort of what it meant for Michelle Troconis and sort of the discrepancies in all 3 interviews.
Kevin, I was in the courtroom on Friday, and I have to say the jury really seemed glued to the screen watching this second interview intently. Loved ones of both Jennifer Dulos and Michelle Troconis were also in the courtroom watching closely. The intensity of those interviews could be felt in the room when Michelle became emotional with investigators.
I love the person to have a relationship with a person who loves only one person, and that's himself. He will do anything he can to get out of what he has done. I have no doubt that he has killed his daughter, his wife, Jennifer. We think you have information.
I know you have, John, but I can walk the whole world with you. I can take you to like a motor place. I can walk, I can spend a month with you guys. I can do whatever you want, but I can't do it.
You know what I want you to do right now? I want you to stop talking to me and take some breaths. Just take some deep breaths. Okay. Okay. It's hard to come to the realization of somebody that you care about, what they're really all about. That's what he's about. And he's always been that way. And he will never change.
So Michelle Troconis breaking down there in front of investigators. She goes on to say that she hates Fotis for involving her in this. Now, the contentious divorce and custody battle also came up. Michelle said that within the months before Jennifer's disappearance, Fotis told her that he had gotten a favorable report in the custody case.
And he was like, we're going to get the kids. I'm going to have the kids legal custody. So he
He's painting a really nice picture for you guys. Yes.
And he said, don't, like, I don't remember the words, you're like, don't be surprised that soon you're going to be like mother of 6. Well, how do you feel about that? I'm like, oh, I know the kids. They're super nice kids.
Now, as the interview progressed, Michelle told investigators that she heard through Fotis' divorce attorney that Fotis and Jennifer had started having conversations on the phone. They hadn't been on speaking terms before that and only communicated through a court-supervised app. So, Kevin, we did get some insight on the divorce and custody situation from Michelle's point of view through these interviews. The jury hasn't heard much about that since we heard from the nanny and her testimony.
Absolutely, yeah. So the jury got a chance to learn a little bit more about the custody dispute as well as the divorce from the nanny. But now this time around, they're starting to hear a little bit more from Michelle's perspective, but ultimately also Fotis' perspective. Michelle and investigators make quite clear multiple times that a lot of what Michelle was sort of relaying to investigators was from the mouth of Fotis Dulos himself. So the jury got a chance to hear a little bit more about what Fotis was saying about Jennifer Dulos before the events on May 24th, and ultimately what Michelle was thinking as well.
As I mentioned, Kevin, Michelle's family has been in the courtroom supporting her throughout all of this. On Friday, her sister Claudia gave an emotional statement.
This is evidently a very hard day for us as well. We're finally seeing how my sister attempted to cooperate not once, not twice, but 3 times with the police, saying everything, trying to assist them as best as she could in this case, and yet she was charged. And this was more than 10 hours of my sister telling them, I'll do anything to help you. I don't know anything. And so I know that everyone wants answers, but my sister's not the right answer. She doesn't know anything. She's innocent. Thank you.
Now, Jennifer Dulos' friends were also in the courtroom on Friday, hearing Michelle in that video mention what Fotis had told her about Jennifer's mental health and the legal battle between Fotis and Jennifer. Kevin, no matter the outcome of this case, understandably, these two families are changed forever.
Absolutely. I think the two families, being changed forever is an understatement. I think both of them have sort of a lot to grapple with throughout the trial. They're both going to see emotional testimonies from both sides, a lot of emotion coming out of this courtroom seemingly every day at this point. So I think, both families are really going to have to wrestle with a lot regardless of the outcome from this trial.
Kevin Geis, live for us once again at Stanford Superior Court. We know you're headed back up into the courtroom for the start of another week of proceedings. Much more to come on Inside the Trial of Michelle Troconis as John Schoenhorn prepares to continue his cross-examination We will hear from, once again, defense attorneys Trent Lima and Mike Fitzpatrick about what we may hear from Attorney Schoenhorn today. All right, welcome back to Inside the Trial of Michelle Troconis. We are joined once again by two of our legal analysts in the trial, defense attorneys Trent Lima and Mike Fitzpatrick. Thank you both for being back here once again. You guys have been watching on throughout the trial. On Friday, we saw more of Attorney John Schoenhorn's attempt to question investigators in this case. Schoenhorn bringing in that piece of video from Avon Storage Facility that shows the rain coming down the night of May 24th, morning of that May 24th, of course, the morning that Jennifer Dulos disappeared. So I got to ask you kind of think, like, where did this video come from? We haven't seen it in court yet. Is that a moment then, an opportunity for John Schoenhorn to try to start poking holes in the investigator's case?
Well, apparently the video was secured by the police. It seems that the prosecution had no intent to use it, but Schoenhorn has clearly used it to his advantage, because right from the get-go, he's showing that Troconis was truthful, that not everything she said was a lie, and in fact, maybe in the end, nothing she has said is a lie.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and ask the investigator on the stand, what does that appear to be in the video? It appears to be rain coming down heavily.
I mean, the officer tries to somewhat parse in the answer, saying, I see rain but not lightning.
Right.
But I think this is an important part where John Schoenhorn can use this to underline the theme that minor discrepancies aren't lies.
Mm-hmm.
And for instance, for someone especially where English is a second language, she says there was a thunderstorm that night and she means a rainstorm. Is that really something where it shows she's deceptive and lying, or is it just an innocent sort of language mix-up?
Right.
And I think he can use that later on.
What do you guys make of these recorded interviews being brought before the jury? We know that Attorney John Schoenhorn wanted to have these interviews suppressed. It's important to note that he was not representing Michelle Troconis at the time of these videos, and he may have had a different idea about whether she should have been speaking with investigators. So are recorded police interviews like this a defense attorney's nightmare, or are there things in these recordings that could work in Michelle Troconis' favor?
Well, they can be both, and at the same time. You know, as lawyers and as analysts and as people who watch trials intently, we can get bogged down on smaller facts, inconsistencies, and sometimes lose sight of the big issue, which in this case, if that jury was expecting to see a confession in any one of those three videos, they walked out of the courthouse on Friday very disappointed. There's no confession in this case. So you can have all the inconsistencies you want, but there's no confession, and juries like confessions.
Mm-hmm. And the other issue is they're a nightmare in that every time you tell somebody what you did, you're going to have discrepancies. If I asked you, Shannon, tell me what you did last Thursday, and then I asked you in another week to tell me, there would certainly be some differences. And that's something the prosecution will exploit and say she's not telling the truth. But the core moment in the video is probably Michelle's emotional reaction when she's told that many of the items Fotis was putting on Albany Street were Jennifer's. And if the jury's looking for some emotion from Michelle Troconis, they haven't seen it in trial, but that may be their belief. They may see that and say, okay, she really does care, and she is not completely icy cold to this.
And it's important to note that she agreed to these interviews with investigators. Fotis Dulos was not cooperating at all with investigators during this time. I want to talk now about then State's Attorney Richard Colangelo's involvement in these interviews. He was State's Attorney at the time, and you can see him walk into that interview room, shake hands with Michelle and her attorney at the time, Andrew Bowman. He even asked some questions and had this to say to Michelle.
We're trying to find out what he did. We wouldn't be here. I would have talked to your attorney and asked you to come in if I thought in a second that you knew what he was going to do. I wouldn't waste our time, because I would have just said, we'll arrest her.
Now, I've covered some of these high-profile murder cases before. I asked Attorney John Schoenhorn, this is the first that I had ever seen a state's attorney come into that interrogation room. Attorney John Schoenhorn told me it is not illegal, but it is rare. So what do you make of this and having Colangelo in there, in that room, during these interviews?
It doesn't occur often, but Colangelo was the only person in that room who could have offered Michelle Troconis some form of leniency, whether it was immunity or some other form of relief. None of the police officers could have done that. And if this interview progressed in a way where she did divulge information which was central to the Fotis Dulos prosecution, Colangelo would have been there to immediately meet with her lawyer and offer her some sort of immunity.
Yeah. Is this often that the prosecutor comes in to these initial interviews?
I would say very, very rare for them to sit on the interrogation. It is not uncommon for them to be involved in the investigation. State's attorneys, especially on a major case, will get a call. For instance, they may go to the scene the very first day of the murder or be there talking with investigators. Being in the interrogation room is unusual. It's not necessarily unethical, but it's not uncommon, especially for a case of this magnitude, for the state's attorney to be involved from the start, just not in that exact way.
Yeah, and what sort of role does the state's attorney have in an overall investigation? Where do their parameters lie for them when it comes to directing the investigation?
So the state's attorney is the one that ultimately decides on charges. So they would decide whether or not someone is on the hook. For instance, it would have been Attorney Colangelo's decision to charge her with conspiracy to commit murder, not hindering prosecution, just hindering prosecution or tampering with evidence. So he has that decision, what charges ultimately are brought. But the second issue is, again, in a case like this where there may be cooperators, he's the only one that can offer any sort of benefit and decide to lower the charges in exchange for information.
And we are watching Michelle Troconis and her family and legal team heading into the courtroom. And we know, again, that every single day that this is playing out, we start to see different pieces of this case coming to light. Coming up, still more ahead on Inside the Trial of Michelle Troconis. We will talk with Trent and Mike about alleged deception in police interviews, what was used when investigators questioned Michelle for the first time, the judge calling those questions deceptive tactics. But how could this help ease and hurt the case? That's all coming up next.
This comes down to a trial. You would have a jury of 12 people, and they would be told the story, and then they would have to say, is that a believable story?
And that is just part of the interview played in its entirety for the jury on Friday, where it mentions those jury members themselves, 12 of Michelle Troconis' peers tasked with deciding her fate. Welcome back. We are here once again with attorneys Trent Lima and Mike Fitzpatrick. So let's talk about this ruse interrogation technique that we learned about last week. It was first used in that first interview that Michelle Troconis gave detectives when they pulled that picture of the bloody pillow before her and said, this is, Jennifer's blood, although they did not have that information confirmed at the time, nor was that bloody pillow ever found. I want to play you now what Brian Foley said, a former Hartford police detective and spokesperson for state police at the time of Jennifer's case.
As an investigator, you think to yourself, this person's lying to me, and lying to me nonstop and changing the story so many times. I'm going to try and throw a lie back at them to get them back on the truth. As long as you're open about it when it comes out in front of a jury, and look at when you use that ruse, that's not your only evidence. You're using that to gather further evidence. So hopefully the witness, in this case, Troconis, she offers up something that will point these detectives in another direction. So it's not what's said there that's going to be the key piece of evidence. You use that ruse to get pointed in the right direction to gather further evidence elsewhere.
Michelle maintains that she was telling investigators the truth throughout all of these interviews. She was trying to help them fill in the gaps, saying, I don't know about Jennifer Dulos' disappearance. What do you think about this technique, this ruse technique?
Police have been using this technique for a long time in all kinds of cases, but they rarely use it in front of a defense attorney. They did it in this case, they did it in each interview, and I have to believe that the reason Attorney Bowman didn't put a stop to it was because he thought in the end his client could handle it, and ultimately her answers would be advantageous to her.
Yeah, that makes you wonder, again, looking back on those videos, that should he have stepped in and said something?
Well, I mean, the reason you're there as a defense attorney is you want to avoid ruse interrogations, but also you're there to stop any kind of badgering of your client, and especially if they start trying to ask questions over and over again in slightly different ways, trying to get slight discrepancies, you may step in and go, no, that's not what she said before, or why don't you answer this question more clearly? So as a defense attorney, you are an active part of the interview if you allow your client to go in for it.
Trent, Mike, thank you both very much. We appreciate your insight. That wraps up our exclusive Inside the Trial.